where she was all about like, how can I like do everything and right? And a perfectionist on top of it. And I thought, wow, how is this predetermined? What the hell? I mean, what's going on here? And I was always trying to get them to, for Sydney to learn how to ask and receive and for him to actually, do it, just balance it out a little bit.
Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I'm your host, Angela Duncan. Today's episode, I get to interview Melinda Wittstock. She is the CEO of Podopolo. We're going to talk about venture capitalists, specifically with women-owned businesses. She's going to give some great tips on if you're thinking about going down that route to raise funds for your company. Some shocking statistics. We're going to talk about podcasting and hearing her thoughts on the future of podcasting, especially incorporating AI. Melinda Wittstock, welcome to Empower Her Money podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. You're going to talk about money. It's my favorite topic. So before we get into today, I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you're at today.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've been around for a while. So I don't know. I was that kid that the 6-year-old who went door to door demanding prepayment for my show. So I've always been an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial. And the kind of entrepreneur that is just really like, I spot problems easily and I'm very creative and very curious. So always want to solve problems, which would explain why I've, done 5 businesses, significant businesses in my life, as well as a bunch of other kind of side hustles and other projects here and there and nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of can't help myself. But all my innovations have been at the intersection of media and technology. I'm an award-winning content creator on one hand, creating, Financial Times television for CNBC in Europe and Asia, creating major shows for the BBC and others, growing media businesses to like 3 million daily audiences. And along the way, really discovering technology. So I've been innovating at the intersection of really media and artificial intelligence since 2009 with natural language processing, unsupervised machine learning, and all sorts of things to really figure out a lot of kind of very pernicious issues in the media world, like how to personalize at scale or how to tell the veracity of user-generated content. And now with podcasting, how to connect fans to the right podcast for them, how to help podcasters grow audience and monetize their content, and how to help brands and businesses get a good return on their investment from advertising on podcasts.
Great. Lots of great experiencing. Obviously, we were on a podcast, so you're very knowledgeable in this world too. But I want to kind of, so I want to focus on venture capitalism. So first question is, if I'm a woman business owner and I'm thinking about raising funds, from like a VC venture capital firm, talk about that a little bit, like what that journey looks like, what you would give advice for, and what we should be preparing for as a woman business owner.
Well, the first thing is really figuring out whether your business actually needs or qualifies for venture funding.
Mm-hmm.
So the type of business that is going to be interesting to a venture investor is going to have a massive and growing market with a company that's very scalable, has a chance of seizing a massive share of that market or redefining a whole category or changing a whole ecosystem, and could scale to $1 billion plus business. Okay. Now, not all businesses are like that. And it doesn't mean anything about a business if it's not like that or whatever. But like those are a very specific type of business. And they usually involve technology because the technology is critical in that scaling aspect of it, right? So there are businesses in like CPG or consumer packaged goods businesses, whatnot, that are scalable enough to take, funding. And there are certain types of VCs and angels that will do those sorts of businesses as well. But for a founder, it's really important to get very clear on like what it is you actually want, and do you actually need that money? And are there better non-dilutive ways of bringing the investment that you need into your company? Because everybody needs kind of starter capital. Could it be coming from friends, family? Are there loans? Are there grants? What are all the different kind of hacks? How quickly can you get to revenue or have some sort of product market fit proven that like the customers actually want your product and service? Maybe they've prepaid for your offer and that kind of thing. But really the first thing is just knowing, does your business qualify for VC, and do you even want it? Because I think one of the things that founders don't understand is when they take venture capital money, they're selling part of their company.
Right.
And so I find it really funny when founders say things like, oh my goodness, I don't want to sell my company, but they're raising money from VCs. I'm like, well, if you're raising money from a VC, the assumption is you have to exit your company within the next 7 to 10 years. And you've already sold part of it. So like,
Yeah, so there could be other options too, is what you're saying, getting a loan or
Yeah.
something else that doesn't give away that equity piece.
Exactly, because you're going to take and you will get kind of diluted down, depending on the valuation. So say you are a VC qualified, there's different stages of growth. And at the very, very early stage, when it's your company is an idea stage and it doesn't have any revenue yet, it doesn't really have any traction, it has just a great idea. Okay. And if you're a founding team that hasn't had big exits already for a VC, or they don't know you, they're going to perceive that as very, very high risk. So they're going to give you not a lot of money and probably take a pretty high percentage kind of in your company. And as a founder, you have to really understand how much investment money do you really need? Do you really need to get to the point where your company starts to turn a profit, right? And whatnot, because what happens is a lot of people raise money and then they can't raise any more. Right? And so like knowing that, and sometimes it's hard to know. But if you are dependent on investment funding, the thing that I've learned too is always be fundraising, because like it's better to be fundraising when you don't need it than when you do.
Yeah, especially right now, I talk a lot about it, like getting business credit or lines of credit before you need it, because when you need it, we don't know what the banks are going to be looking at. So that's very interesting too. As a woman business owner, I'm definitely guilty of this. We get so involved in our business and we give everything of us in our business that we kind of forget to make sure that we're looking at a bigger picture when we're diversifying. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that and maybe some advice for women who are solely focused on just one business.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think, backing up a little bit, I think women do fall into the trap of thinking they have to do it all. Right? To kind of do it all, to have it all. I remember a long time ago, I had this little side hustle. I was doing retreats for pretty high performing female entrepreneurs. And I remember having conversations, like pre-qualifying conversations, like, do you qualify to come to my event kind of thing, right? And I would say things like, well, we're trying to bring together women who really want to play a bigger game. And there'd be this, and I was noticing this with a lot of women, there'd be this brief moment, almost imperceptible, of terror in their eyes when I would talk about playing a bigger game. And it took me a while to realize that what they were hearing me say was they're not doing enough and they're already burning out. And actually I wasn't saying that at all, because you can play a big game through leverage. Like you don't have to do it all yourself, and nor should you be. Like, if anything, if you set out thinking that, you're going to constrain not only the size of your business, but the profitability of your business, the value of your business, the impact of your business, right? And something that men inherently understand, like even my son, when he was a little small kid compared to my daughter, he was all about getting other people to do things for him. Like, how can I like do everything and right? And a perfectionist on top of it. And I thought, wow, how is this predetermined? What the hell? I mean, what's going on here? And I was always trying to get them to, for Sydney to learn how to ask and receive, and for him to actually, do it, just balance it out a little bit. But I find that women do fall into that trap, and then it really holds them back in business, because it means that, say if you're too slow to hire people because you're thinking of hiring as an expense instead of an investment,
Mhm.
you hire somebody, you're hiring them not just to do something, but to actually deliver a result that's going to advance and grow your business and give you more time to focus on the things that only you can do, right? Where you're providing the most value. And then other people can fix website links, like whose time is less expensive than yours. Right. And do all these other things. Or if you don't love spreadsheets, there's someone else who does love spreadsheets, right? So it presupposes getting really, really, really clear on what you love to do and what your unique zone of genius is, doubling down on that, hiring the rest, right? Having good systems in place to hold people to accountable to results, and getting over it. Like, you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to do it all, period. It's what holds us back.
Hmm. Yeah, great advice and information. So when we are kind of so busy in the day to day, how do you approach, or how do you start thinking about, like, what am I going to delegate? How do I go through that process? What does it look like? Because I think it also could be a very overwhelming thought process that maybe we just don't end up moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting. I remember there's this great book on this called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Really, really worth reading. And really, from that book, he talks about the difference between primarily your zone of excellence and your zone of genius.
Mm.
But I plotted on a quadrant, a 4, like a matrix, right? You've got your zone of genius, which is the things that only you can do. Like, you're uniquely here in an earth suit at this particular time on the planet to do this. And it so happens that you love that too, but you're like in your zone of genius. There's nobody else who can do what you can do because you're unique. And then the zone of excellence, where you're excellent, you're truly excellent at a number of one thing, 5 things, whatever. But there are other people too who are also equivalently excellent, or maybe slightly more excellent than you, but like as equivalently excellent. And then there's your zone of competence, where you can do a lot of things, but you don't necessarily love all those things. Okay. And other people would be in their zone of genius and zone of excellence, whereas you're just in your zone of competence and you don't love it. And then there's your zone of suck. Okay. So the zone of suck, and we all have it. Invariably, usually it ties to something you hate doing. You would rather watch paint dry on a wall, and you're going to procrastinate about it because you hate doing it and you're not very good at it. It's like it's not intrinsic to you. It's more of an extrinsic behavior that just doesn't come naturally. Okay. So I do this periodically for myself, at least once a quarter, where I reevaluate all these different things in these boxes. I get my team to do it. It's really interesting when you have a team and you figure out what people think about themselves versus what other people, and then you get together and we can sometimes evaluate a lot of these things. But that helps really, really clarify. So when at the beginning of a day, you have this long to-do list, okay, and you're like, which of these things should I be doing? Should I do or not do? Which ones can I delegate? And which ones are the most important? Because often when you are operating in your zone of genius, you're going to do one thing that has a multiplicity of outcomes that is going to move your business forward, even if the other things don't get done.
Hmm. Yeah,
You know,
the zone.
I've noticed that loads of times. So it's just kind of like a clarifying system that helps you kind of, because it all starts with knowing yourself in business, right? And being honest with yourself in terms of, and like, hopefully we become entrepreneurs because we want to have freedom. Like, we want to do what we enjoy doing. So
Yeah.
Why
Your
trap ourselves if we don't
Your
have
zone
to?
of suck you were talking about, the first thing that popped in my head was cooking. I don't like to cook, but I also feel like, I know kind of what my strengths are, but you're right. There's things that I know that I'm competent at, but I know that if I hired someone, they could likely do a better job than I could. And those are the things. And then also like, what things can you delete? Like what doesn't need to be done now? Maybe it's something that you can do a year from now. That's not the most important for growing your company.
Yeah, exactly. I think one day I had this because I've had this interesting thing in my kind of spiritual growth journey where my to-do list, which was never done, it was always depressing at the end of the day, turned into an intentions list once I started to get into like the power of intention. And then it transformed even more. And it's now an inspiration list that comes to me in my morning meditation, right? And there were a couple of different versions of this. One where I incorporated what are known as the Rockefeller principles into it. And, the Rockefeller principles, for folks who don't know, is like you have, say, your top 5 priorities in any given day. And you start with priority number 1 and you work on priority number 1 until you can do nothing more on priority number 1 before you go on to priority number 2. Now, some days you might be working on priority number 1 all day. People say, what about 2, 3, 4, and 5? Well, their priorities 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're working on your main priority, right? This is important. Other days you could maybe advance all 5, right? But anyway, one day, so I sort of incorporated the philosophy of that into my kind of inspiration intentions list, where I was like, okay, this is where I can be of most value to the company today. Okay. And I don't know why, but because I knew better, but I was working on priorities 2, 3, 4, 5, and this kind of disorganized, kind of like a rabbit running around a garden, kind of like right, like that. And I wasn't really getting anywhere at
Mhm.
all. And then I was frustrated, and then it's just sort of like, oh man, I'm not, I'm not working on priority number 1. So I started working as about 1 in the afternoon. I started working on priority number 1, and suddenly, here's the really weird thing: not only did that advance, but 2, 3, 4, and 5 solved themselves without me needing to even be involved
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah.
Like one of them literally went away. It wasn't even an issue, right? Another one just got resolved by someone else on the team. Someone else had a better idea, right? Like that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as the CEO of Podopolo, one, how did you come up with the name? But I would love to know, how did that get started? What was your purpose and your vision for starting that platform?
Okay, well, I'll get to the name after.
Okay.
The vision really, I had sold my previous business before Podopolo, and I started a podcast because I wanted to really pay it forward to other female founders. I wanted the podcast I wish I'd had coming up, like feeling very isolated as a female tech entrepreneur. And I wanted to catalyze an ecosystem where people, women mentor each other, buy from each other, invest in each other, etc. And so I just like started this podcast. Now, this was 2016, and I was coming at it. It's called Wings of Inspired Business, and I was coming at it based on the fact that like I had not only grown shows for major media to 20 million audiences, I had a good solid background in marketing, finance, I understood algorithms because I'm working in AI. I mean, all the things. And it was really hard to find an audience, let alone grow it and like, monetize it and all that stuff. And it was very frustrating. I mean, at one point, I actually had several side hustles just to support my podcast, just like the wrong way around. It's like, wait, what? And so I started talking to other podcasters, and I realized I wasn't alone. Like everybody was having the same problem. And I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is a problem in the entire ecosystem. And then I
Mm.
started to think, well, what about the other side of the market, like fans? What's their experience like? So I started to really dig into that, and invariably fans told me they listeners struggled to find new podcasts that were interesting or evaluate them, and they were frustrated not being able to easily discuss them with friends and other things, right? And then I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. So podcasts aren't being monetized. Podcasters can't find their audiences. Audiences can't find the right podcast.
Mm.
Meantime, it's this huge growing thing, but it has a fraction of the advertising revenue. It's like 22% now of all internet traffic, podcasting collectively in the world, and it's less than 2% of the digital ad spend. And
Wow.
there's this unbelievable disconnect. And then the other disconnect was that when brands and businesses do advertise on podcasting, it's the highest converting media of all time. Like, so some conversion rates to sales as high as like 30% off a podcast. Some
Wow.
are even crazy higher than that, right? And yet advertisers were instead spending a lot of money on social media advertising, where, you're lucky if it converts at 1 or 2%, say. And they were missing this big opportunity. So why was that? Same time, 98% of podcasters didn't even qualify for ads. So there are all these like broken pieces of this fast growing but fragmented ecosystem. And I realized with a mix of like, AI, and also now coming soon, part of our blockchain solution for part of these things as well, is that really it was the data and the actionable intelligence to connect these different pieces of the puzzle, introduce billions of new revenue into an ecosystem, but also save money for everybody as well, and helping everybody. So that was the initial kind of impetus of, and then looking around and talking to people about it and seeing that nobody was focused on taking on the ecosystem as a whole. Like, there were certain people that go, okay, I'm going to create this little tool for a podcaster to do X. And I know someone over here, I'm going to do this other little thing to do Y. And it was all just very fragmented. So that's really where we came at it. And I think you asked me about the name. So this is funny. Sometimes people ask me if it's my surname, and they ask me if I'm Greek. I say, so is Melinda Podopolo? Like, are you Greek? And no, I'm not. And it's not my last name, obviously. I was trying to figure out how to come up with a name that was fresh and different, that suggested community, but also a sense of fun, because of the part of the gamified nature increasingly of Podopolo, where fans win rewards just for listening and such, right? And there was this woman who'd come on my podcast, and she was a namologist. I'd never heard of a namologist. It's like different from a numerologist. It's how the relationship between the letters in your name apparently says something about you, right? I had no idea. And so I kind of tested her out, like, so tell me about me then from my name. She came up with 3 things that there's no way she could have known. And then I learned that she did this for defense and prosecutors in selecting juries. She did it for major corporations. She did it for like all sorts of people, like psychologists, like everybody. So I gave it a go. It wasn't that expensive. She asked me 10 things that I wanted people to feel upon hearing the name, and 10 characteristics of my ideal customers or clients, and what we did. And she got back to us in a couple of weeks, and it was Podopolo. So
Wow.
with it, yeah. And it's kind of fun. Like, people are like, it always starts a conversation, and it tends to bring a smile to people's faces, which is one of the intentions. So it's hard to pronounce, though. People
I was
stumble
gonna say, I bet a lot of people mispronounce the word, and
all the time, and I don't really care. Like, we can sort of, hopefully make that into an asset of some kind. But once they get it, they get it. But naming is hard,
yeah. Yeah. And you're creating a brand behind it. So you want to use a word that doesn't maybe mean something when you launch, but it will mean something later, like Google and eBay. These are all words that were
Yeah.
just made up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, you just have no idea. That's the thing, especially if you're the type of business that's changing a whole category, or like creating something that hasn't really been done before. It sort of helps to do that, because you're not easily defined. Mind you, if you're selling pizzas, you're like the pizza shop, it's easier. It's like, that's you're named what you do. So
Yeah.
for that, it would be really hard to come up with something for Podopolo, because it's like pulling all these different pieces together that have never been quite put together in that way before. So
Yeah. So with your vast experience, both, professionally with AI, content, media, and podcasting, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts of where you think some changes will happen in the future when it comes to podcasting. I mean, it's come a long way, but we do have AI and technology. Are we going to have like a number one podcast that is completely AI someday? I'm curious to see what you think the future might hold for us.
Oh gosh, I think we're going to see all kinds of innovation. Because whenever there's a new tool and you unleash human creativity on a new tool, people come up with all kinds of things that we couldn't even imagine right now. And that's one of the things that's exciting about it, right? I also think there are other things that are going to be problematic with it as well. So I'll talk about the good part of AI and the bad part of AI. So, like on the good side, yes, that creativity, but also the efficiency with which shows can get produced, or translated into other languages, for instance, or, one of the things we do at Podopolo, we have a whole generative AI suite. So automatically create high quality transcripts, but also show notes and social media posts and emails and workbooks and graphics and like clips and all these sorts of things. So that used to take me many hours to put all that together to promote a show. Now it's done, and the AI has learned and increasingly learning my voice, so can write in my voice. All that stuff will get better. I think one of the things we'll start to see are avatars or sort of digital twins that can be lots of things. They can be sort of your assistant to answer questions from your fans, or learn from the whole body of your podcast. And maybe you have a book, or you have this, or you that, or a course, or all that kind of stuff, and can be your kind of avatar, doing things for you, but interacting with people, and such. So I think that's coming. I think the biggest innovation, though, I mean, certainly in the near term, does really, apart from the automation and making things easier to do and saving time and all that stuff for the Gen AI side of it, it's about the data. And this is what comes down to really what we're doing at Podopolo, because if we can know from hundreds of millions of episodes in real time and over time, what's the ideal podcast for a person based on what we know about the audience, demographics, behavior, that kind of thing, right? It's just going to get easier to find the right podcasts and for podcasters to find and engage the right fans. But that contextual ad placement is going to mean that that 22%, 2%, that's going to start to, right? Because if you have the right data, the audience numbers don't matter as much. Right now, you need 10,000 downloads or more to qualify for advertising. In podcasts, that's less than 2% of the market, right? And that's just because people don't know who's listening. But if you know who's listening and what's being talked about, it takes the guesswork or the risk out of it for the advertiser to invest ads on podcasts that have smaller numbers, because they know a higher proportion of those will convert. So I think there's a lot of, and this is true in lots of industries, where really the AI is the synthesis of the data into real insights that result in actionable outcomes. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on there. I think on the downside of it, though, I think podcasters will start to struggle to protect their content and defend ownership of their content. Their content can easily right now be completely copied, translated another language, and there's no real recourse. So that's where we see blockchain being absolutely vital. So very soon, Podopolo will offer podcasters wallets that automatically their RSS feeds getting written to those wallets. So it's proof that they own that content, because blockchain isn't just about crypto. It's really a ledger of record of the provenance. Was this just even for detecting deep fakes, was this real or is this a fake? Was this, actually, created by Angela or someone who purports to be Angela? Do you own it? Do you not own it? That kind of thing. So I think you will start to see blockchain really, part of that kind of evolution, whether it's authenticating and protecting the ownership of content, or other ways to really engage and reward fans and monetize in new ways as well. So that's a lot. And then, I mean, I think it won't be too long either before, if you decide to listen to a podcast in a immersive way with AR, VR,
Mhm.
we'll start to see things like that too. A lot of like really interesting technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great insight too, because obviously you're really in the industry, and so to hear what you're
Yeah.
seeing and what you think the future potential is very interesting too. Because I like to say I don't know AI. I know there's a lot of tools that I use that are considered AI, but I don't really know AI. So I love hearing your thoughts and what you think the future holds.
Yeah. I think right now it's an interesting time too, and particularly because there are really only a handful of very large companies that own all these large language models, and with very little transparency in terms of what they've been trained on and how they've been trained and whatnot. So there's a lot of female and minority voices missing from these models. I
Hmm.
think it's going to be really important, and I think we'll start to see specific models, just like we're doing, specific models for a specific use case,
Yeah.
right? Train in a specific way for a specific purpose, for specific value. And like, and that, because there needs to be diversity in the market. Otherwise, it's just sort of will become this corporate control overlord, which I think it scares a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why I started my podcast. I like talking about money and teaching money. And in my space, it's an industry that's very male dominated. And I do believe that women think differently, act differently, invest differently, run their businesses differently. So why bring, an area together where we can come together and talk about what we've learned and teach each other, because someone else is in that problem right now and they need some guidance. And the male counterpart isn't always the best guidance for us. So I get the voice and, bringing more women to the table. So I love that you said that as well. So what's next for you? I'm interested to know, because you've done a lot and, growing companies, exiting companies. What do you see in the future for yourself?
Well, really two things. I mean, I'm still right deep in it with Podopolo. So I want to grow that to, a significant exit, really, and make it a major wealth generation event for not only myself, but everyone on my team, and add a lot of value. We still don't know exactly what that looks like. It may just be that as there's a certain point that the company and the way it's financially modeled is spinning off so much cash that we don't actually have to sell to another company,
Mhm.
um, that it's possible to stay private and not have an exit in the M&A sense, but be able to buy out, investors. And there'll be a certain place, if that's the trajectory, there'll be a certain place where I fire myself as a CEO and hire a CEO and
Mhm.
allow myself just to be the owner, right? I don't know when that is, but I know that's true. My other big mission is being an investor in women and underlooked founders,
Mhm.
um, because we still only get 1.9% of the venture money. Like, and these, going back to the beginning of our conversation, this is of women who qualify for VC,
Mhm.
right? And Goldman Sachs, or no, it was Morgan Stanley, estimated that by by keeping that number, that investment so low, venture capitalists in the US alone have basically been locked out of something like $39 trillion in
Mhm.
revenue growth, right? And not to mention that women entrepreneurs, we return capital at more than twice the dollar. I mean, more than $2 compared to a man, in terms of the investment dollars, all kinds of amazing and compelling statistics. So women are being overlooked, and yet they're creating amazing things. They're getting small check sizes if they get invested in at all. And so I really want to invest in other women. And at a certain point, I want to create my own fund and such. And I'm already working with another fund. So I'm kind of learning my craft, helping to build a fund that will be investing in a lot of female founders.
Yeah, and it's sad too, because if you think about the ideas across all sectors that are just not being brought to market, and how we could be advancing in all of these different sectors, but the ideas are just not being heard because they're not getting the opportunity, right? So that's a very interesting dynamic, and that the numbers are still so low. I'm surprised that they are so
It's
low.
insane they're that low. And part of it is because, so all these VCs say things like they use pattern recognition. Actually, what they do use is mirror recognition. Like, does this person look like me? I mean, so the old pattern recognition thing. And I remember having a VC meeting, when was it, 2011? I had a startup at the time that it was pre-Instagram, and it was crowdsourced content, like photo sharing, pre-Instagram, photo sharing, video sharing, like text and whatnot. It was called News It. We had 500,000 creators on that mobile platform. We'd innovated the mobile UI. It was before Facebook figured out mobile UI. We had all that going on. We had all this stuff going on at the back end of this that would actually analyze the content for relevance and reliability. It was incredibly sophisticated. It was built on less than $200,000, right? Like unbelievable, unbelievable success. And I was talking to a VC in New York. He listened to my pitch. He paused for a bit and he said, "Melinda, that's great. Somebody's going to do that." And I was like, "What? Like, I am doing it. Did you just not even hear me?" And I began to think maybe all he heard was la, 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 la. And because as I left, he was like, "You don't fit our pattern." And I'm like, sort of facetiously say, "Well, that's interesting. We use pattern recognition technologies, and use it." So like, and he's like, as I'm walking down the street, I'm in New York and I'm walking down the street and I'm like, "Let's see, I don't fit the pattern. Let's see, I'm not wearing a hoodie. Okay. I don't eat ramen noodles. There are too many carbs. And I didn't invent anything in my garage because I don't have a garage. I didn't drop out of MIT, Stanford, or Harvard. You know what I mean? Oh, right. Like I'm a woman. And I wasn't 20 something. I was in my early 30s. So like at the time, and you just think, oh my God, like, because that's how narrow it is. And so just all these opportunities lost, for that. And I have so many stories like that, like so many pitches where you're just literally, they'll take the meeting, but they're just literally not even listening. And a lot of them also work only on warm introductions. So if you don't know anybody in their little bros club network, how do you get into it? And they'll tell you things like, "Oh, just use grit." And you're like, "What?" Okay, like I'm gonna stalk you, like that's gonna work?
Yeah.
No, because it doesn't, and it won't, right? And so I'm encouraged that a lot of women are starting to invest, but I also think that women need a lot more education and confidence around investing in venture and angel and all these things, investing in companies. Because I've seen women with tremendous wealth have no problem writing $1 million check to charity, but like literally, I've been told by such women, like incredibly wealthy, it's like, "Oh no, for investment decisions, my husband does that." I'm like, what?
How do we get more involved? If we
Yeah, so
have money, how do we find these
part of it's
wealthy women?
education, because women do believe they have to know everything about something before they do it. And my response to that is like, when I go to the doctor, okay, and the doctor says, "Okay, I want you to take this," I don't respond by saying, "Okay, I'm going to go get my medical degree and evaluate that before I come back." Okay, so why? Because men don't invest that way. They're like, "Okay, I believe in you. I think the idea makes sense. I believe you'll do what it takes as a founder. You got the tenacity and the grit and the passion and the expertise. And you'll kind of make it right. Here you go." And women are like, no, they've got to like understand every single last little detail about AI or this or that or what, right? We're just very cautious. And so it's just how to get people more comfortable and understanding the kind of returns. And it makes sense too to diversify where your wealth is coming from. So not all in the stock market or not all in insurance or in real estate or whatever, like just have a good diversified, portfolio.
Gotcha. All right. So fun question for you, totally off topic. If you could have a superpower,
Ah,
what would it be and why?
oh my goodness, if I could have one. Oh, that's just so, I don't know. Like I think with any superpower, I was gonna say something and I thought, oh, I don't know if I'd actually want that.
Yeah.
Um, because I was gonna say, God, I'd really like to know what people are thinking. And then I'm like, no, maybe, maybe I really don't want to know that. Um, oh my God. What superpower would I really want to have? Um, I think the superpower to consistently not be derailed by an inner bully voice.
Hmm.
Okay, because I mean, for all my accomplishments and for everything, like, and I think this is true of everybody, and I think it's really important to say, particularly for entrepreneurs, because it's sort of like you can get in this thing where no matter what you do, no matter how many amazing things that you overcome, it's like it's never quite enough, right? It's really, really hard to do the types of things that entrepreneurs do and what I'm doing, and I can be so hard on myself, right? Like to the point where my daughter, like when she was 10, she wrote this big poster and she said, Mom, you're enough.
Hmm.
So sweet, but like it had to come from a 10-year-old. I couldn't work it out myself. So I think this is just my wish on any given day to be just consistent in that kind of higher vibration, right? Of that. And I would wish that for all women.
Love that. Well, Melinda, this has been extremely educational, insightful. I mean, even for someone that loves talking about money, you definitely opened my eyes on a lot of things. So if our audience wants to follow you, learn more about everything that you're doing, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Okay. Well, LinkedIn is probably, I don't know, I've gotten sort of beaten down by social media. I'm not a big social media fan anymore. I used to be all over it, but like LinkedIn is the best place. So just my name, Melinda Wittstock. And then you check out Podopolo. It's just podopolo.com. Download the app and like it's free, check out all the things, cool things we're doing. If you're a listener or you're a podcaster, that kind of thing. And that's probably the best way. I mean, I'm on Instagram, but I just don't answer my DM. Like I forget to look at my DMs, right?
Yeah, no, I don't either. Because most of the times they're like, do you want to be on the cover of Forbes for $12,000? It's like,
Exactly. It's like I'll be on the cover, but not for $12,000. I mean,
well,
Anyway,
thank you again so much for being on Empower Her Money podcast.
thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Empower Her Money podcast. I am grateful for you. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, like this podcast, share it, subscribe, and let's keep teaching others how to take control and be empowered with their finances.